So, hey guys, it's Bats here, and I am back with another story video, picking it up from where we left off last time, where, I had just ended up homeless, on the streets and was getting deeper and deeper into my fentanyl addiction. Um, so, we're gonna go ahead and, have a little community, smoke break before we, start here, so everybody out there, if you've got anything to get zooted on, this is the time to do it. So yeah, let's do that real quick and then we'll just jump right into it. Alright, cool. Alright. Go ahead and hit the vape too. Oh yeah, that was nice. Okay. So, at this point, right, as I mentioned, I'm, getting deeper and deeper into my fentanyl addiction, I'm fresh out on the street, I was like, I think, just barely 18 at this point, um, and so I was just kind of figuring things out, you know, uh, most people that I was meeting on the street at this time were very hesitant to, even talk to me and let alone give me, sell me or do drug, give me drugs, do drugs with me or sell me drugs, especially, fentanyl, which at the time it was still blues, which, is still fentanyl, but those were, little, blue pills that were made to look like Oxycontin 30s. They were, they were made, they were pressing pills in the exact same shape as a Oxy 30, but they were blue and they were just cut and fentanyl. They had this like popcorn taste and flavor that I used to love at first, but I can't stand it now. So yeah, this was back when that was still like the main way that people on the street were doing, Fetty. And compared to now, blues are so much weaker compared to what's been around the last couple years and what I do now, you know. But this was around the time that the transition was kind of starting to happen, where it was, people on the street, it was starting to switch from the blue pills to, the fucking full, just pure fentanyl powder, rocks and shit. Not pure fentanyl powder, obviously, because that would just, like, kill people. Like, even worse than it already does. There's always cut, It's like, basically impossible to get fucking fentanyl that doesn't have some sort of cut in it, because that would just be really dangerous. You could get close, though, and especially, like, when this transition was happening, it was a lot less cut, a lot more actual shit, and just like, it was a lot cleaner and purer back then. People weren't throwing whatever the fuck they could think of into it to try and make more money off of it or whatever. It wasn't getting stomped on hella hard. But that doesn't stay that way for very long. We're gonna get to it a little later on down the line, but eventually there was a period of time, like last year, where for a couple of months they started putting this nasty fucking shit in the cut of fucking Fetty, and everybody called it boat glue because it literally tasted like fucking glue, and it was awful. Like for months, it was almost impossible to find any fucking dope that didn't have that nasty fucking boat glue shit in it, and it was like fucking 90% boat glue and barely any actual fucking dope, so it would barely get you well, so you would fucking smoke a bunch of it, still be sick, And then, for, like, that boat glue shit was toxic as fuck. Like, I literally had to go to the hospital because of that shit. Because it's like, we called it boat glue for a reason, because it's so fucking thick that, over time, smoking that shit, you would literally you started feeling like your fucking airways and your throat were, like, closing up and, like, getting all fucking, blocked. Because that shit would literally fucking basically glue your goddamn throat and fucking nostrils shut. And it got so bad to the point where literally the reason I ended up having to go to the hospital was because somebody made a joke and it was so funny and I started laughing, but because I had been smoking so much boat glue and my fucking airways were so fucked off that when I started laughing, I started fucking choking and suffocating because my airways were so blocked that I couldn't breathe when I was fucking laughing. I started literally fucking suffocating and, like, passed out for a minute and ended up in the hospital because my fucking lungs were so fucked off I could barely breathe. And, like, anytime I fucking coughed or sneezed or laughed or anything like that, really, it hurt like a motherfucker. It, like, hurt really fucking bad. And yeah, my fucking lungs and my airways were, like, fucking super fucked off for months after that. After that hospital, visit, I refused to ever do the shit ever again. If I got boat glue after that, I would just throw the shit away. I'd rather be fucking dope sick than smoke that shit. Because, like, there's a lot of other people ended up in the hospital over that shit during the time, and some people got it worse than me and ended up, like, fucked up for life or literally dead. But I'm talking too much about this too early, so don't worry, guys. I'll, give you guys the full rundown on that time period later on, but let's focus back on what I'm here to talk about, which is, this time period of my life where, I'm new on the streets, right? The transition between blues and, Fetty powder is kind of starting to happen, right? But it's mostly still blues, right? And I was still almost, exclusively doing blues at the time. And yeah, I was so fucking depressed after my ex dumped me. In 3 months, I overdosed 17 times. Like, in that short period of time, I OD'd 17 times. Because I just didn't care. I was just fucking trying to get as high as I possibly could. And I would literally smoke until I fucking blinked and just went unconscious. And I either nodded off really hard for hours on end until I woke up, or I would OD and I would wake up because somebody fucking Narcaned me. And that's just kind of how my life was. I literally would fucking smoke as much as I could, as much dope as I could get my hands on. I would smoke it as fast as possible and try to get as high as possible, as fast as possible, in the hopes that I would just either get so high that I was effectively fucking lobotomized, you would, like, if you were to try and, like, come up to me and talk to me at that point, my goal was to get so high that it was like talking to somebody that was lobotomized. Like, I just wanted my brain to be blank. I didn't want to think about anything. I just wanted to turn my brain off. So if I could get to lobotomized fucking brain status, or even better, be totally unconscious for as long as possible, that was ideal at that time in my life. And yeah, that's very dangerous, so that's why obviously I overdosed 17 times in 3 months. But, because I was smoking so heavily, though, I started building a tolerance pretty quick as well. So eventually, after a while, my tolerance got high enough that I stopped ODing. I could smoke the same way I had been, as hard as fucking possible, trying to fucking, get as fucked up as possible until I was unconscious or fucking lobotomized, fucking lobotomy mode. But I just stopped ODing because my tolerance was, high enough that it would take a lot more to do that. Which was fortunate. It was a good thing because, it was a lot less likely that I would accidentally fucking kill myself then. And since that time, my tolerance has grown a lot. And I've only overdosed, like, I think twice since that time. So, yeah. After that, short couple of months where I was ODing all the time, ever since then, I haven't really had that happen to me very much since. In fact, since that time, I've had to fucking deal with other people ODing a lot more than worrying about myself. The role's kind of reversed, and I've saved over 20 people from overdoses, and I'm really proud of that. Nobody's ever died on me, and I've never left anybody behind when they OD in my presence. And I'm, proud of that, because I think, the way I see it, right, somebody made the choice to stay, even though they were probably scared and, worried that, I might die in front of them, but they chose to stay and save my life every time. So, I feel like there was a reason for that, and I feel like, the right thing for me to do is to try to make that, those chances that I got, the second chances I got at life, to make all of that worth it and not just waste it entirely, So, at the very least, that's why I'm making videos again, because people tell me all the time that my videos are helping them and they're going through similar stuff to what I've been through. And I feel like that's, a way that I can give back and make that worth it and make, me not dying any of those times not pointless. And another way is, for me to return the favor to, anybody that I can. If somebody overdoses, and in front of me, or if I stumble upon them and, they've overdosed and they're just alone or whatever, I check everybody. Whenever I find somebody, when I'm walking around on the streets, if I see somebody alone in an alley or in a corner, just sitting there slumped, not moving, not making any sound or anything, I always make sure to go up and try and wake them up and check them, make sure they're breathing, make sure their heart's beating, make sure they're good. And, I've saved multiple people's lives because of that, because I went to check on them and they weren't okay. And if I hadn't checked on them, there was nobody else around, and nobody else probably would have found them until it was too late, And because I always carry as much Narcan as I can fucking get my hands on, I, try to at least have 10 Narcans on me at all times. I want to be prepared to save multiple people's life in a day if I have to. And believe it or not, there have been times where I've used more than 10 Narcans in a single day because so many people OD'd and I had to help. But I would do it all over again every time because, those people are getting a second chance at life. And, that's the people, made the choice to give me a second chance all those times. So I feel like, the right thing for me to do is to return that any chance I can to somebody and save somebody's life, give them another chance at life. Because nobody deserves to die like that. Nobody deserves to overdose on the street and fucking die alone. Alright, that's, no matter what that person has done, or whatever you can fucking say about them, whatever, the media wants to fucking say about opiate addicts and all this shit, no human being deserves to die like that. Alright, and if you disagree with me, you're not a good person at all. Like, you're just fucked up, like, for real. So I always save anybody that I can. But anyway, back on topic. So yeah, after I, got enough of a tolerance to stop ODing, a bigger problem, became more and more apparent is as I got more of a tolerance and was more consistently doing dope every day, when I didn't have it, I started getting more and more fucking sick when I didn't have it. And it just, the more I did it and the higher tolerance I got, the worse the sickness would get every time when I fucking didn't have it. And that was what, kept driving me to get up every day and try and fucking find some way to hustle up some fucking money or something to get more dope so I wouldn't get sick. And I spent a lot of fucking time, being fucking dope sick because I, just like, didn't keep up, on my hustle and, fucking ended up running out of dope and fucking wasting too much time and fucking, all of a sudden I'm already fucking sweating and getting, bad dope sick, and I haven't even figured out what the next thing I'm gonna do to fucking get more is. And once I'm sick like that, I have no energy, and like it's so much harder to do anything. It's harder to think, so that just makes it even harder to figure out what to do and actually go and do it to be able to get more. So it's just, it was all bad. But, like I said in the last video, I started figuring stuff out through trial and error over time. And, as I slowly got, met more people on the street and, a few, people tried to help me out and whatnot, I would be introduced to things like flying a sign, which I turned out to be really good at because I look and sound really young. Not as much anymore. I still do, but back then especially, I looked and sounded like a fucking 13-year-old kid. And I'm short too, so I'm as small as a 13-year-old kid as far as most people, are concerned. So, I got a fucking marker and some cardboard, and I started scouting out fucking different spots and figuring out what good panhandling spots are, and what times are best to go to those places. Because, let me try to explain it to you guys real quick. The, way that a good panhandling spot works, right? You can't just go anywhere and sit on any corner or in front of any fucking, store or whatever and just expect to fucking make money at any time, alright? Different, places and different, stores at different, fucking places and in front of those stores, different, angles and places, if you sit somewhere, in the front of a store, but you sit in an area where it's going to be almost impossible for anybody walking in or out or by on the street to notice and see you, you're going to not really fucking do well. But if you position yourself somewhere where anybody coming in or out of the store or even walking by is going to see you, no matter what, that's the best, that's what you want to do. You want as many people to see you, and especially if they have to look at you and look you in the eye, all right? And you need to try and get their attention, all right? You don't want to be demanding or scary or threatening, because that'll scare them off. You want to be friendly and polite and not demanding, So one of the things I would say a lot is, I would say, excuse me, I would say, excuse me, do you think you could spare some change on your way out? Thank you. And, shit like that. As they're walking in, I would say that, right? So I'm not pressuring them to give me money right then, right? I'm just politely, kind of getting their attention, getting them to look at me and acknowledge me, and, asking them if when they come out of the store, after they go to do what they were going to do in the store and make their purchase, if they have any, if they could, spare me some of the change, right? And that has, in my experience, worked out more often than just outright asking for it, at that moment, or not saying anything when they walk in and waiting for them to walk out to say anything to them. Although both of those things do work sometimes depending on the people and the time and the place. And that's the other thing, all right? So, different places are more, you'll be more successful at different times at different places, So, for example, like a Starbucks, right? You want to be at a Starbucks in the early morning, from right when they open to 12 o'clock, like afternoon, like lunchtime. That's the best window of time to be there. Because typically, at least in Seattle where I am, right, when a Starbucks opens, especially if you go to a Starbucks in like a pop, like a popular Starbucks in a area with a lot of people, then that Starbucks is gonna fucking have a ton of people, flooding in and out when it first opens, because everyone in that area is waiting for the Starbucks to open so they can get their morning coffee, right? And that's another thing, is you need to be mindful of the type of people that are in the area that you're trying to set up at, right? You want to set up in an area where people, where it's people that are, that are going to have money and that are going to have enough money that they aren't going to fucking, have their fucking family starving to death and shit, or like, get kicked out of their apartment because they don't pay the rent because they decided to give you fucking money. I'd ignore that. Anyway. But, you don't want to be somewhere where people barely are getting by themselves, because they're a lot less likely to help you out, right? So you want to go somewhere where, there's people that are, like, upper middle class, they've got some money, they've got a good job, all right? You probably want to go somewhere where it's, like, nicer people, like, not to be racist, but, like, where it's, like, mostly white people, or, like, Asian people, or, that kind of thing. And yeah, you want to go to an area like that rather than, a poorer area where people, don't, barely get by themselves. You're going to be a lot less successful in those areas, right? And yeah, generally you just want to be, visible, well positioned, you want to be friendly and approachable. You don't want to look like a junkie, you don't want to look like a scary fucking hobo that's going to rob them. You want to look, you don't want to look too nice, though, because if you look too put together, they might think that you're faking it and not give you money either. So you have to look just a perfect balance of, like, actually, like, homeless and, like, struggling, right? But not so bad that it's, like, gonna scare them away or make them think that you're some, like, fucking psycho. You can't, like, look super fucking pissed off or mean, or be sitting there nodding off or fucking twitching and tweaking out on fucking meth. Like, you can't do that, Most people don't mind if you sit there and smoke a cigarette, or, depending on where you live, a joint, or, hit a vape. That, like, people don't really mind that as much. Some people still, like, do. Like, I still get dirty looks for hitting my vape when I'm flying a sign sometimes, but, it is what it is, bro. But yeah, so I, over time I kind of figured out all of these things about, like, panhandling, and, like, started finding multiple different spots, that I could go to at different times, and, like, how to be the most successful at that. And I developed a bit of a routine where every day I would, go to, this, a group of, certain spots. And, I would, in the morning, I would go to this one grocery store, right? And I would sit out front of that grocery store with a sign, like, right there. And I positioned myself in a place where basically anybody, no matter what direction they were coming in from, would have to look at me in some way. And, where anybody walking out, I would be able to catch their attention by saying something to them. They would hear me no matter what. And that place worked really well for me for a very long time, all right? Because it had a big parking lot in front of the store, and where I was sitting, everybody would see me as they were getting out of their car and walking up to the store, right? And when they would get close, that would give me, just enough time to be able to say something to them to try and get them to notice me, remember me, and, consider helping me out. And it worked a lot, and it was a nice area where it was mostly white, middle-class family kind of people, like, white moms and shit. And because I looked so young and was, friendly and presentable and whatnot, I guess I reminded them of their kids or whatever, their grandkids, because there was a lot of white old people as well, and they would feel bad. And, sometimes they would ask me how old I was, and I would, like, say I was like 16 or 15 or 14 even sometimes, and they'd believe me, because I genuinely could fucking pass as that age at the time. And, when I would say that too, they would automatically assume that I didn't do drugs. And some of them would ask me how I ended up like that, like, where are my parents, like, where's your family? And then I would explain to them how my parents are dead, and they would feel really bad, and that's true. My parents did die when I was 13, which is a big part of why my life ended up going how it did. Not gonna get too into that though. But yeah, so then they would feel bad and they would go in the store, do their shopping, and on the way out they would either give me some food or a drink. Sometimes, people would always ask me if I wanted anything to eat or drink from the store, and there was a few things that I would always ask people for, like donuts or ice cream or, like the Starbucks like glass coffee things, Monster coffee, soda, like Mountain Dew, Dr. Pepper, that type of stuff. People would give me like chicken strips and stuff like that from like the hot like bakery area all the time, which was awesome. And some people would give me food and money. And on an average morning, I would make no less than fucking $20. At the very least, every day I was making $20, before noon. And, there was some days where I made fucking upwards of, 60, 80, nearly $100, just before fucking lunch at that spot. But over time, because I was going there every day, eventually people got sick of me, and even the store and the employees and shit and the managers got sick of me, and they started kicking me out. And that sucked. That was one of my best spots. Another one of my spots was right across the street where there was this fucking gas station, like 7-Eleven type thing. And I would typically sit there, like, if I got kicked out of the Safeway, or, if it was, like, late at night and that, store was closed, and I had nowhere else to really try and make money for the night. That was kind of like where I would go when everything else closed. But typically, right, I would make, at least $20. I would stay until I got at least $20, right? And, I would try to see if I could get, more, but if it was, really slow, once I had 20, I would just leave, and I would go, hop on the bus, head right up to the fucking area where all the fucking, drug people hung out in Lake Shitty. I would go find somebody with some dope and buy a dub and fucking, have my first smoke of the day. And typically I would try to, save some of it so that I still had some, and then I would hop back on the bus, go back. If it wasn't like noon yet, I would, go back to the same spot. Even sometimes I stayed at that spot until like, fucking like late day, like fucking early night. Hell, there was times where I stayed at that store all the way till closing. But, over time I ended up realizing that as it got later on in the day, it got a lot slower. And also, if I was just there all fucking day, people got really annoyed with it, So I learned that I had to kind of switch it up. So I ended up, after a while, right, around, afternoon or, like, late afternoon, I would leave that store, right, and I would go to another store that was, a couple of bus stops down the road, and it was, another, like, store with a big parking lot where, I positioned myself where everybody, when they got out of their car, would see me and have to walk, by me to go in, and would walk by me coming out, and so I would, they would, it would be easier to get their attention and, get them to help me out. And at that store, right, the second store, there was one time where I legit made like $200 in a couple of hours there. Okay, there was times where that was a really good spot for me. And then there was also some times where it was a really bad spot for me. There was times where I barely made $10, but it was kind of hit or miss, but when it hit, it really hit. And then there was like a Walgreens that was, roughly across the street from that store. where if there was, someone else at that spot, because it was kind of a highly contested spot. A lot of people wanted that spot because it was so good. If somebody else was there, I realized quickly that trying to just fucking compete with somebody if they're already there just ends up with neither of you really getting shit. So it's better to just move on and go somewhere else and let them have it for that time. And some fucking panhandlers get really protective over their spots. Like, they'll fight you over the shit. I literally had this dude at this, store that I'm talking about right now, literally multiple times pull up and start, fucking talking shit to me and, pushing me and threatening me and shit. But the funny thing is he did it, right in front of everybody, so he kind of shot himself in the foot because nobody wanted to give him money after they watched him bully me out of the spot, especially since I look like a little kid and shit. It did not look good on him, and that pissed him off even more because he just didn't make as much money after that shit happened. And I would make a big scene out of it. I'd start yelling yo, what the fuck, man? Really, you're gonna fucking fight a kid? What the fuck? You're fucked, man. And, fucking make him look hella bad. But, yeah, and when situations like that happen, though, I would just, usually leave and go somewhere else. There was also another spot that I would go to that was a Target that was, a little bit further down, but in the same kind of area. And that wasn't always the best spot, but I found it, later in the night. It was, better to be there. And it, had overhead covers, so if it was raining, that was nice, too, to not get rained on. But, yeah, that was a good spot as well. And so I kind of rotated between all those spots at different times of the day and had a little routine for quite a while, and for a long time that worked for me. Every day I would do that, and I would fucking make enough money to support myself and not get sick as often. At this time, though, now that I was starting to make money and be able to get dope, right? Me being the kind of person I am, right? And I'm also starting to get to know more people in the area around here, right? When I have dope, if I see somebody that's dope sick, especially if I, know them or they've helped me out before, right? I'm not gonna be that guy that fucking pretends they don't have shit or fucking acts like they don't see him or whatever. If I see somebody that's dope sick, I know how that feels, and especially if they've helped me before, right? I want to fucking return the favor when I can. And because I was more capable of that at the time, I started doing that for a lot more people. And unfortunately, the kind of people that they were, some of them saw weakness and started playing me. So I had, people that acted like they were my friends, and they fucked with me and shit. And, acted like we were all locked in and shit, and, I started my young, naive ass on the street, bare, fresh out, fucking started thinking, maybe I'm, starting to actually really make some friends, and then they would fuck me over as soon as it was, the most profitable for them. I'd fucking trust them and fucking nod off with my fucking, with dope out around them and wake up and they're gone, the dope's gone, and won't see him again for fucking months. Or they'll try and fucking rip me off or set me up, or some shit. I got fucking backstabbed and, it hurt a lot, And so as time went on and that happened more and more, I started getting more and more jaded and, cynical than I already was, And just, got to this point where I felt fuck this, man. I hate everybody here. I had a bad experience with everybody in that area, after a while. And, it was just, made me fucking it made my mental state worse than it already was, and I was already in such a bad mental state when I started there that I was fucking a couple of bad days away from just going full fucking Joker mode and just going psycho and just killing myself or some shit, just crashing out fucking totally, where you can't come back from it. So I didn't need that shit. It was killing me, bro, for real. It was just sucking what life left I had in me out of me. And so eventually I made the decision that I needed to get the fuck out of there. And so I went to and hopped on the one line, which is like the main like transportation train line in Seattle and whatnot. And I ended up in Capitol Hill, which is where I live now. And that's kind of where I'm gonna leave this one because it's getting pretty long, and that's kind of the end of the Lake Shitty section. There's some stuff, some more Lake Shitty stories that I could tell, which I will at some point, but that was the general overview of that, period of time in my life. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate all of you guys' support. I read every comment and try to respond. I love each and every one of you. I've, been appreciating all of the, nice comments and messages I've been getting from you guys since I started uploading and started this channel. It really, means a lot to me. And I'm glad that, I can entertain you guys and help you guys through whatever you may be going through in life. Trust me, I get it. Whatever it is that you're going through, I've been through so much shit the last couple of years, but you gotta keep going. You can't give up. All right, it'll get better. It might get worse again after that, but just know it's like a roller coaster. It goes up and it goes down. But if you're down right now, there will be an up eventually. Just know that, and try and keep that in mind. Keep moving forward. Without any further ado, though, leave a like, comment, subscribe. Stay zooted, stay lifted. Peace.